I haven't actually made any Sonic-related videos on this channel, despite being a huge fan of the games ever since I played the original at age 8, I think. I was mildly intrigued looking at the pre-release trailers that Sonic Team had put out in the lead up to Sonic Frontiers, but like most people I think these days, to avoid disappointment, I keep my expectations for Sonic games on the low side. However, after reading the very positive reviews from sources I trust, namely Metro Games Central and John Linneman of Digital Foundry fame, I started to actually get a bit excited. I purchased the game on Steam and played it solidly for 3 or 4 hours. That's a phenomenon I haven't experienced since probably Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast, I think. And I am delighted to announce that Sonic Frontiers is very good. So, where do we begin? Well, I guess the most immediate and most important improvement over all other 3D Sonic games, in my opinion, is the mechanics, physics, and collision detection type stuff. The very nuts and bolts of the game, if you will. They're by no means perfect in Sonic Frontiers, but Sonic feels far better in the hand than he ever has, in 3D at least. No longer will you frequently get trapped in an invisible gap between two objects or get fired randomly across the map for no apparent reason whatsoever. The whole experience feels far more solid than it ever has before in 3D, and this establishes a foundation for the genuinely ambitious game Sonic Team has created here. From the perspective of an almost middle-aged man, a man who waited and waited for Sonic to turn up on the Sega Saturn back in the day, and then rejoiced at Sonic Adventure for the Dreamcast, despite its flaws, and then saw Sonic... oh god. It seems to me that the fundamental issue with 3D Sonic games is that Sonic is too fucking fast. He is so fucking fast that he does in fact break the game engine. What's a suitable retro analogy? Well, try playing the original Wipeout on the unlockable faster speed levels and witness your ship smacking its little pointy tip on the roof of the tunnels or clipping through the track at regular intervals. The engine is stretched beyond breaking point, and Sonic is similar in my opinion. I go as far as to say that in the 25 plus years that Sonic Team has been trying, Sonic in a 3D environment has never really worked properly. I know the likes of Sonic Generations are okay, but the square peg has never quite been made to fit the round hole. To be honest, the way things were going, I didn't expect this problem to be solved anytime soon. I've got a lot of time for Sonic Adventure, I really am fond of it, particularly the first one, but revisit it today and look at the issues it has. It is very flaky indeed. Now it's true that Mario 64, recognised as one of the greatest games of all time, also had numerous issues, particularly the camera system, but look, it was quite a bit less severe, let's be honest. In Sonic Team's defence, I don't think many people appreciate how damn hard it is to have such an insanely fast character work in a complex 3D environment. The bar was extremely high. That being said, in all these years they should surely have found a more elegant solution than this. I think part of this problem is that Sega has struggled so much financially the past 25 years or so. Sonic has always been the cash cow, and I should imagine there's always been a lot of pressure from Sega internally to keep churning out Sonic games on an almost yearly basis. Sonic Frontiers, however, has had 5 years of development time, and surprise, surprise, it's mostly paid off. You can almost feel the damn good thrashing Sonic Team has given the animations, physics, collision detection, etc., etc. And lo and behold, I think that finally, some 25 years after first seeing him rendered in real-time 3D back on Sega Saturn's Sonic Jam compilation in 1997, Sonic basically works in 3D. Now, just to clarify, there is still some jank. A word on this though. Despite Breath of the Wild being acclaimed as the best game ever, or even a perfect video game, there were numerous times I encountered jank there too. I also encountered the odd bit in Super Mario Odyssey as well. Sonic Frontiers has a bit more, yes, but considering the sheer speed at which Sonic moves relative to Link and Mario, and the variety of activities you can undertake on its 5 islands, what Sonic Team has achieved is really, really impressive. It can't be overstated how much skill and effort it must have taken to make this game work as well as it does. The bulk of said jank is, I think, due mostly to having such a broad, open environment. Two-dimensional games are much simpler. It's a more straightforward task to keep a grip on all this stuff. In a large, 3-dimensional environment, however, there are simply so many possible permutations and ways in which the player can interact with the environment that eventually you are going to expose something weird. It happens in all large-scale 3D environments to different degrees, and Frontiers is no exception. That being said, the fact that Sonic contains some jank is okay, as far as I'm concerned. In fact, it's quite in keeping with how things used to be. Sonic was never a flawless 2D platformer, not that it was buggy by any means, but you would experience the odd glitch and inconsistency. Zelda and Mario were always a little ahead in this department. They were infused with an almost puritanical pursuit of gaming perfection by its creators. That's always been a Nintendo hallmark, and it's a big reason why they continue to make such amazing games. Sonic, however, was a little different. Sonic won you over with its speed, wonderful feeling of weight and momentum, and its sheer, irresistible enthusiasm and sense of fun and boundless creativity. Sonic was an irresistible force, not a flawless video game. Occasionally, it overreached itself, but that was something that endeared me to it, and that's why I continue to love it, even 31 years after its release. Jesus wept, I'm getting old. Similarly, Sonic Frontiers wins you over with its sheer speed, scope, variety, and great sense of place, overcoming its relatively minor flaws. Frontiers, I would argue, is in fact a more ambitious game than Mario Odyssey, and despite the cues it takes from Mario Odyssey, and Breath of the Wild obviously, it remains absolutely unique from either title. Actually, in my opinion, it most closely resembles Bowser's Fury on the Switch. That game also had an ambitious, varied, and open-ended structure, and it was hopefully a glimpse of how mainline Mario might play in the future. Well, Sonic Team has to some degree beaten Nintendo to the punch in that department. The islands here are huge, yet filled with stuff to do, and the sense of progression works great. It's atmospheric, at turns relaxing and visceral, and it's also really compulsive. I always wanted to uncover the next thing, be it the next action stage, the next conversation with an NPC, or the next boss. Now, although the structure is pretty wildly different from previous Sonic games, of course, I would argue that there is actually a precedent for it in the earlier games, and that is, wait for it, Sonic CD. What the fuck are you on about, Retro Mule? I hear you ask. Well, let me explain. For their time, at least, Sonic CD's levels were in fact enormous and really quite freewheeling in nature. If you took the time to explore them, there was lots of stuff to see, hear and discover. There were also multiple permutations of each level depending on what era you were currently in. There was a time travel mechanic at work. Along with the at times bizarre visual design, cool as a cucumber soundtrack that took cues from house and techno music, the likes of DJ Frankie Knuckles and British electric band the KLF were referenced by composer Naofumi Hataya. Mix all this stuff together and you get a recipe for a Sonic game that was larger in scope, offered exploration as well as speed, and had an overall greater level of ambition and a sense of weirdness than your typical Sonic game. So I would argue that some aspects of Sonic Frontiers do in fact, by design or coincidence, have their roots in earlier entries of the Sonic canon. Now, the tone of the game. I was skeptical when I saw the trailers for Sonic Frontiers, but surprisingly, however, the tone is very nicely and consistently applied here. It really does work quite well. Resurrecting your friends and hearing what they have to say is a surprisingly tender and earnest enterprise. I wouldn't say the tone was somber, as many reviews have stated. I'd describe it as wistful and a little melancholy. On paper, it may not sound like it's going to chime too well with Sonic, but the way they've implemented it here works.
I'm not sure what happened, but I know what I saw. A love that transcended time. I believe in that power. When this is over, I want to share that love with the world, even though it may take us far apart.
I know you'll do great. I want to hear all about it when you come back.
I'm very fond of the Sonic Adventure games for Dreamcast, but there was one trend that I think is a bit regrettable. Sonic started talking. Now, Link doesn't really speak, Mario doesn't really speak, and in my opinion, neither should Sonic. It diminishes some of his mystery and magic, in my opinion. Sonic does speak in Frontiers, of course, but the guy doing the voice acting is actually quite good for a change. Also, he doesn't talk too much. The lack of voice acting is part of the abstract quality that the older Sonic games had that is key to their magic, in my opinion. Aside from their fantastical visuals, in Sonic games you never quite knew where you were or what was going on, in the best possible way. You got a slight hint of a narrative in the cutscenes, if you will, but it was largely left up to the imagination. Yes, there were Sonic novels published back in the day, in the UK at least. I owned a couple actually, that tried to fill in a lot of the gaps in the storyline, but come on, it's Sonic, you know? On a side note, this is also the case with another magical game made by a Sonic team of old called Nights into Dreams. Now that's a whole other video that I'm keen on making at some point in the near future. This magical, abstract quality has been largely absent since at least the Sonic Adventure games, I'd say. One thing I love about Sonic Frontiers is that it puts some of this abstract quality back into Sonic. Yeah, it's a very different kind of abstract, of course, but it does have a sort of discombobulated sense of place that's very welcome as far as I'm concerned. A couple of images spring to mind: Dr. Robotnik, or Eggman depending on where you're from or when you were born, floating about in the abstract digital realm with mad pipes and roads and whatever looping over and over in the background. Or Big the Cat, standing by a sun-drenched pond with a crazy digital macro blocking sky overhead. These images, along with many more, are more abstract, imaginative and visually interesting than anything we've seen for some years in the Sonic game. It's pretty damn cool stuff. So, to summarise, what is Sonic Frontiers? Well, I would say it's a somewhat flawed, highly ambitious, technically impressive, highly likable, fresh, and exciting video game. Is it the dream Sonic game we've all been waiting for all these years? Not quite, no. It certainly needs some polish and refinement, but most importantly, it is good. There's an attention to detail and a sense of care that's evident right from the get-go. You get the real sense that Sonic Team is making a serious and concerted effort to get this right, and that is a wonderful thing. Personally, I'd love to play a Sonic game with a similar structure, but with the exuberance and sense of fun of the older 2D titles. Maybe I'll get that with a sequel, or maybe I won't. What's most important though is that this is a solid 8 to 8.5 game for me. This is in my opinion Sonic Team's most ambitious and probably their best game since the Dreamcast era. And finally, I am excited for the next Sonic game. Bravo Sonic Team, and please don't fuck it up.